I always encourage people to do a lot of kind of schedule manipulation too, so that because this can be kind of a whiplash effect in healthy habits, is if you're choosing, okay, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to start meal prepping, I'm going to start getting in my steps, I'm going to start working out. Sometimes there's a mistake of you unintentionally pick the hardest way to do everything.
Yeah. Or trying to do all of it at once.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're not taking the easy win on any aspect of it. Everything is as hard and as sophisticated as possible. And I often coach people on, just manipulating your schedule a little bit and taking some easy wins. So anything you can do to reduce friction.
Let's link up with Krysta on the Fix. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Rachel, welcome to the Fix podcast. So excited to have you here. So excited for the Fix listeners to get to know another amazing coach who's been in the space for a long time and has a lot of wisdom to share. So thank you for being with us today. And like I mentioned pre-recording, I like to kick things off with all the Fix guests. As a big coffee drinker myself, what do you like to sip on in the morning to get your day going?
I love coffee. So I'm a big espresso drinker.
Nice.
But ever since I had my daughter about 3.5 years ago, since pregnancy, I have gone to completely decaf and then didn't really go back afterward. And so that's something kind of unique about, the way I drink coffee is that I absolutely love coffee, huge fan, drink it every day, but I do drink all decaf. So we have our espresso machine, our Nespresso machine. We love it.
Nice. That's really interesting. Before we even go into the rest of the show, I'd love to know, like, from a pregnancy standpoint, I totally understand why it's recommended to switch to decaf. But after that, did you notice anything in like trying to reintroduce the caffeine that it didn't like sit well with you?
Yeah, I was one of those people where it just made me feel more jittery again once I started reintroducing it. And for me, I was like, I love the taste. I love the ritual. There's no reason not to have it. But yeah, I just switched to decaf and it's fun because we do the espresso. We don't make big pots of anything.
Yeah.
So it's easy to just like have what everyone wants.
Nice. Well, that's on listening to your body, right? Which is something
exactly
that will come up in the rest of this conversation. So with that said, the way that I typically open this up, especially with other coaches and anytime we have a guest on the show, is really asking you to dig a little deep within the first question and get past the whole like resume, what kind of coach you are. All of that's going to be kind of weaved throughout the rest of this chat. But I'd love to know, knowing that there's lots of podcasts out there and so many people that we can seek information from, listen to, get advice, etc. Why should somebody care specifically about what Rachel has to say?
If I wanted someone to save this podcast and listen to it over and over again, the reason would be is I want someone to feel heard and understood who has bounced back and forth between like macro counting, then intuitive eating, then I don't care about my weight's fine, to I have to lose this weight, to doing keto, back to intuitive eating, where they just like can't find their groove with nutrition and with self-care and with their weight management. That is why I'm very passionate about what I do, is that I love meeting people at that place where they haven't found, quote, the answer in a particular diet. It's not something that's coming easily to them. And to work with that person to get below the surface of just like, oh yeah, just eat more protein or just whatever, fill in the blank, and really get into more of that comprehensive, how do you integrate weight management with things like self-acceptance, more intuitive eating strategies, sustainable lifestyle changes. I'm really getting into that stuff. So if that's you, if you feel like you've ever been stuck in that spot where you just like can't get traction, or you've gotten traction in the past, but it was like a miserable version of your life and you weighed what you wanted to weigh, then I hope you listen to this whole podcast and get a lot out of it.
Oh, I love this. There's so many different ways we can go with this. There are no accidents in the universe. And literally this morning, I was having this conversation with a potential client in the DMs, and I'm sure it comes up for you too. There's the combination of different coaches saying different things, giving different recommendations, and you could scroll on Instagram and see, 5 different pieces of advice within 5 seconds, right? Coupled with your own life experience and having trouble, I think, this was at least my own personal journey with this, accepting that when different parts of our life and we go through transitions and things change in our schedule and routine, just because something worked for us before doesn't mean it has to work for us at this time. And being able to be open to trying something new, but also being able to let go of that. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm curious for you to bring the listener into a little bit more about your path and how you got to where you are. How did that show up in your life? Because I would imagine in you sharing that and that being the first thing that popped into your head to answer that question, you've lived it too, because that's what great coaching is really all about.
Yeah. What is it? Turning the mess into the message.
Yeah. Right?
That's saying, yes. So I do have my own weight loss quote success story from a long time ago. So over a decade ago, I was about 40 to 50 pounds heavier than I am now. And at the time, I did not have a good, healthy lifestyle at all. I wasn't exercising. I did not have a good relationship with food. In that time of my life, food was the answer to everything. And it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was like pathological. It was just the way it was, where it was like, oh, happy, let's celebrate by eating. Bored, let's entertain by eating. It was just kind of the answer to everything. And definitely when you couple that with a very sedentary lifestyle, you're going to have, weight and health issues for yourself where you're just not in a good zone for you. And that's where I was. And I've told this story before on another podcast, but the turning point for me was that I had gone on an international trip and had basically, eaten my way across Europe. And it was a long trip. It was about a month. And I came home, and within a month had been enough time for my body to actually change from overeating, where I had gained weight and I actually looked different. And I remember whenever my then boyfriend, now husband, he opened the door and saw me for the first time, that there was this flicker of an expression across his face that was like shock, because I looked so different. And that was really a wake-up call for me, that food had become something that had started to go out of the territory of like, this is fun, this is okay, into I think I'm actually like self-harming with my food behaviors and with my habits. And that was a real turnaround for me, because at that point it just clicked, and I started, and this is for the first time literally in my entire life, I started exercising through walking, through some like really, really simple strength training, home yoga practice, but no, protracted workouts, very short things. And then really started taking better care of my food and of my body. I started meal prepping. I started being more proactive. I started being more mindful about portions and what I was putting into my body. And without getting into, super specifics about diet, but it was quite general in the sense of it was just eating better than I was. I wasn't following any specific diet. And, it's lucky when you are younger and you don't have as many life responsibilities as you have when you're older, it did feel like the weight just fell off. And so then, you lose weight, and then it's a question of maintaining weight afterward. And fortunately, I got lucky in a lot of ways in terms of I have a healthy home environment. My healthy lifestyle is really supported. But over the years, I've had a journey with weight in terms of maintenance, and then having, baby, losing the baby weight, all of that is part of the journey as well. But, I have found, as part of my coaching, I really, really work on sustainability with clients, because I have had my own experience of that you do want it to be a lifestyle that you can keep doing and keep going, and not feel that it is this heavy burden where it's, maintaining your weight is like a ball and chain. But instead, it's something that's very energy giving, it's very life giving to you. and it's something that's sustainable. So, I try to take that from my own experience and then also from best practices and from what research says about eating psychology and weight management, and to package that and distill it for my clients.
What really sticks out for me the most in you sharing that is just talking about the fact that you made very general, simple changes, right? And that was the domino effect for you.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, with the way technology has changed and the access to information, like I was talking to at the beginning of this, has just made it so that people are like, well, could it be this? Could I need to try this? Is this the thing that's wrong with me? Like, have you ever thought about the fact that maybe at that time, because we're talking like what, like 2014 that this, that
Oh
you went
yeah,
on this
probably like
journey?
2010. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
like we didn't have social media really, not like
yeah,
now.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about that, in any way, do you think it was, I'll put this in quotes for everybody who's listening to the audio, easier for you to focus on simple changes and actually ride those out versus
Yes,
jumping to being like, oh, it's been 4 weeks, it's not working, and let me go try this other thing over here?
absolutely. I definitely think that it was an era of much less distraction in general, and that includes informational distraction, where if you have shiny object syndrome, you had to go looking for it. It wasn't going to be delivered directly to your brain 24 hours a day like it is now, where you could see an article and be like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't be eating fish, or something that's really a distraction from just the core principles of a healthy, mindful lifestyle.
Yeah. And I'm curious now, fast forward to today and you working with your clients. And I know you do focus a lot on the training side of things and focusing on
Mhm.
strength training. So I definitely want to get into that too. But before we go there, on the nutrition piece, what does that look like for you? Knowing that so much of your own personal success is rooted in the simplicity, how do
Mhm.
you structure that for the people that you're working with? Because you and me both, everything I said about conversations I have in DMs, I'm sure you experience the same thing where someone feels
Mhm.
overwhelmed, they feel confused. And then forget the information overload. Let's talk about what you alluded to this in mentioning the word distraction. How about the life stuff? I don't want to call it
Mhm.
distractions, but managing more responsibilities with
Yes,
children,
adult
work,
life.
relationships. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, basically what I try to work on with clients is behavioral strategies, because I think that is the spirit of simplicity. Is you're focusing more on what you're doing than, like in the case of like using apps to track calories or macros, for
Mhm.
example, you focus more on what you're doing than on what you're recording or observing, because I think that's an area where people can get really hung up, is like between apps to talk about food tracking, then there's also the wearable tech
Yeah.
that can be, it's weird because it's not distracting in the sense of it is giving you a lot of information about health and is drawing your attention toward health. But at the same time, the way people use it can be, counterproductive. The way it can lend itself to being used as counterproductive. And so, really getting more to the core of, yes, but what are you actually doing? And really just paying attention, like with food behaviors, to the actual behaviors. So, planning food. What are you eating? How are you shopping? When are you eating? Working on things like stress eating, dining out. Because a lot of what people are struggling with nutrition is not something that's easy to capture in
Mm.
numbers,
Right.
even though there are numbers happening, like the matrix in the background every time
Yeah.
you eat. At the same time, it might be almost impossible to capture. So the thing that you can do to feel the most successful is really dial in on the actions that you're doing.
I love that so much. And you and I have had conversations about this just one on one. I think that's a gap for a lot of people, especially when somebody is looking to, like to even just like dip their toe in the water with something like macro tracking.
Mm-hmm.
They try to do it on their own. They try to enter a very like low ticket type of program, and there's not necessarily a lot of support around it. And that
Mm-hmm.
yields this story of, well, if I just focus on the numbers themselves, that's going to get me to where I want to go. And what I've really seen a massive shift in, even in my clients in like the last 6 months, and probably from doing this work in my own life of looking more at my actions and like what feelings are coming up that are causing me to do a certain thing or to not do a certain thing, right? That's where the unlock is. And sometimes I hear people say things like, oh, it's like about anything in life. You hear the commentary of like, it's not that deep. But when it comes to food and when it comes to some of these behaviors, I am of the camp, it is that deep. Like what you're trying to accomplish, if you haven't been able to do it by jumping from, like you said, from macros to intuitive eating to keto to whatever, it's not about the methodology. There's something else underneath it that's going on.
Yes. Yeah. The why and the how really matter. And, a lot of what I'm doing with clients is detective work in terms of when you're eating at these certain times, like not just taking that incident in isolation, but actually stepping back more to, okay, well, when was the last time you ate? What did you eat? Then how did you plan that meal? Why did you eat it at that time? And once you start really unfurling everything, you start getting a lot more into issues of stress, time management, being reactive versus proactive. There are a lot of attitudes and mindsets and, lifestyle architecture that goes into it, not to mention like emotions and, people stress eating and things like that. So there's the psychological aspect of it as well. But even if you just look at habits, time management, stress management, there's so much to uncover when it comes to nutrition. And then sometimes if you just dig into that and get on a better routine and you're more proactive, you might take care of 90% of your nutrition issues anyway. And sometimes there's an aspect of, do you need to perfect the last 10% or the last 5%? If you start with a good, robust plan that takes a lot of your issues head on, you don't need to be perfect.
Right. And I see so much of this in the culture around for women, especially whether you're a mom who also has a career on top of her career as a mom, right? This talk track of like having to put everybody else's needs in front of your own, being selfless actually makes you a better parent, partner, employee, whatever. But I find that's where so much of the time management piece falls apart for people. Food becomes an emergency. You use the word reactive. When we look at somebody in the context of, let's say they were tracking their macros, what I always like to ask clients is when they have a day that they didn't hit them, it's like, well, what actually happened to you in this day? And I always tell them all the time, like, the more I know about your schedule and the more I know about you and the way you think, I can guarantee you so much more success with how you can make this process and like really mold it to fit your lifestyle. But at the same time, the true shift happens when we start to change our mindset around recognizing that, hey, putting yourself first is going to make you a better parent, partner, etc. And really trying to like undo some of those beliefs, because I see them as very self-limiting. And I know it's like a wider scale. Like if I think about the mission of the Fitness Fix, that's something that I am really passionate about, because as somebody who's not currently a parent, like having worked with so many females and moms specifically over the last like 7 years, I feel like I've gotten such an education in like, hey, if you put everything above you, this is what can happen, to the point where you start to feel so stuck. You start to feel like, how the heck did this happen to me? You start to feel the anxiety. And it's like, it's been a cool learning experience for me, just as much as I'm teaching people and having this like vantage point of not being a parent and trying to challenge them to think about like what can fit from your life before that and where can we find your true identity in that. So as a mom yourself and having made that transition and also owning your business in the last few years, what does that look like for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I think coaching moms prior to becoming a mom myself, it's kind of two-sided. Where on the one hand, I'm like, I can't believe some of the things I said to people. Like, I have no idea. But honestly, on the other side, I think coaching moms helped me be more prepared to be a mom and to handle the challenges, because it gave me a little bit of a crystal ball preview of, oh yeah, that's a real problem. Okay. And I was more prepared to get in front of it as a parent because I had seen it play out. And I think for a lot of parents, I think the biggest challenge is just being blindsided by issues that you didn't know were going to be issues, because either people don't talk about it, or it's just not very well broadcast, or it's like furtive and secretive if it gets talked about, or people have shame about it. So I think because I was kind of this receptacle where people would talk to me openly about things they were dealing with their stress and with their kids and with their health, I got a really, really good projection of things that I would like to see in front of as a parent. And it was really helpful. But yeah, I definitely think it's funny. I just put something on Instagram about this today, a guest post someone did for my site, that it really is filling your cup first, or putting your oxygen mask on first. It's that idea of when you take care of yourself as a parent in terms of having a focus on your health and fitness, you are making yourself so much better in terms of putting yourself in a position to be a more present, creative, dynamic, engaged parent, versus if you're just hanging in there in survival mode, you might actually be more time present or more physically present, but the quality of the time might be much lower. And that's a big issue, because parenting can be really, really draining. And, you know, as a parent, you never regret when you take some time for yourself to, you know, compartmentalize the workout, because then you have so much more to give, you have so much more to contribute. But I would also say, in terms of what really works with parents, it's funny, it's not different from people who aren't parents. I think it's just on hyperdrive as a parent, because you have so much more time scarcity. I would compare it to someone who has like a really, really, really demanding career, where it's one of those jobs where you're getting emails at 6 a.m. and then you're getting emails at like 11 p.m. that you're still expected to answer. So if you have that kind of job, you know, whether or not you have kids, a lot of the same principles are going to apply, because there's time scarcity issues. And I think one of the biggest things that people can do is systematization, in terms of, you know, earlier I was using words like actions, behaviors, decisions. And it's true, but the downside of using those isolated kind of words makes it sound like you're making a decision every single time to say, okay, I'm going to exercise now, I'm going to use the willpower to drag myself through this, versus having these systems just on repeat in your life, where you're reducing that decision fatigue and everything's just kind of laid out, and you're making things as easy on yourself as possible and reducing friction as much as possible. Because, you know, when I use that example of myself, like, oh, the weight just fell off, you know, for the audio listeners, I'm making huge air quotes with my fingers. You know, I think it, quote, fell off over like a year. And the truth is, most people aren't willing to be that patient. And, you know, if you want really great results and you want to sustain them, you kind of have to be that patient. And I think that's where systems come into play, because our willpower can only sustain excitement for so long. Something is novel and unique and energizing. It's like a honeymoon phase. It might be for like 1 to 3 months max. And then after that, what are you going to do to keep the engine actually running, you know, to keep the systems going? And that's where habits are so important. So every single time isn't an individual isolated decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 1,000%. Super aligned with what we focus on inside of the Fitness Fix too. And even, you know, tracking those habits to give you the ability to take the step back and actually see what's working for you. And if, let's say, a habit has been consistently working for you for a long time, and then it feels like all of a sudden it's not, that's where we have the information to be like, okay, what changed in our schedule? Or maybe, in other terms of what you were saying, like this whole systemization idea is synonymous with having boundaries too. And having that self-respect to say, hey, like, I set up this system to commit this time to get my workout in, and hold that structure for yourself. It's easy to get the results that you want, as long as you're willing to do that part of it. And where I think people find it harder, and it's not because of like the actions that we're asking you to take, it's the structure around it, right?
Yes. Well, and there is an aspect of boundaries that means anything you say yes to, you're having to say no to something else. Time is finite, you know, it is like a bucket of water. But at the same time, something that, especially with parents, because we are concerned about quality time as well, is I always encourage people to do a lot of kind of schedule manipulation too. So that because this can be kind of a whiplash effect in healthy habits, is if you're choosing, okay, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to start meal prepping, I'm going to start getting in my steps, I'm going to start working out. Sometimes there's a mistake of you unintentionally pick the hardest way to do everything.
Yeah.
Where
Or trying to do all of it at once.
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're not taking the easy win on any aspect of it. Everything is as hard and as sophisticated as possible. And I often coach people on, just manipulating your schedule a little bit and taking some easy wins. So anything you can do to reduce friction. And I think sometimes people do that, not because they want things to be hard. I think it's because of that enculturation from years of dieting or from negative baggage around weight or dieting or exercise that you may have gotten from your family of origin. But it's this feeling of it has to be hard. It should be hard. And I don't think that's helped by, Instagram reels where it's like, love the grind, if that's the message that works for some people who are into that, but most people aren't. So I really encourage people to, pick times to do things where it's not a super critical time, because people are weighing, should I spend time with my family for family time or should I go work out? And it's like, well, yeah, if you have to draw the boundary there, you could see how they're not going to be consistent because they're picking the worst time to do it because they have that belief that you have to choose versus, well, what if you just did it at a different time? What if it was shorter? What if it was before your kids got up? So, you do have to pick the boundary somewhere because if you do it before your kids get up, that means you have to wake up earlier or, whatever the case is. But I always encourage people, try to pick the low hanging fruit, try to have as little friction as possible, because those are the habits that are going to have the easiest time catching versus if everything is this big A-B decision where for you to win, your family has to lose or something like that. Like you're not going to stick with it. Like eventually the pressures of your real life are going to win.
Yeah, so well said. And I was waiting for you to bring up the word shorter in context of workouts because I see that often as I just had this conversation yesterday with a client who is in a season of life where her daughter isn't in school every day, all day. And she comes from a background of having a lot of performance-based goals, running races, triathlons, even Ironmans. And it's been learning to now recognize in this new season of life that not wanting to be the way she wants to train anymore, and being okay with that too. It's okay. And us then having a conversation where we talked about hey, can your workout be 20 minutes? And noticing that what comes up for people a lot is they need permission to recognize that that's okay.
Well, and that's part of all or nothing thinking because it's not the same for everyone because some people love exercise and they're going to be more on that almost exercise addiction side of the equation where their relationship with exercise is nearly problematic because they like it so much and could overdo it so much. Then I would say more like, I don't know, 75% of Americans really don't like exercise. And you can see that reflected in the percentages of people who don't meet even movement standards, even walking 30 minutes a day. There's a lot of people who don't enjoy exercise. So it depends on the person. But something interestingly that can affect both of these groups and the spectrum in between is all or nothing thinking, where it's completely black or white, where whether it's someone who likes exercise or doesn't, if the workout is 20 minutes, if they don't have permission to have it only be 20 minutes, they won't do it at all. So even someone who wants to run for 2 hours won't exercise for 20 minutes because it's not enough, So you have that issue of instead of doing a little, going down to zero. So yeah, hearing fitness professionals really validate that yes, you can get in enough movement to be fit, to make progress on performance goals, and to satisfy general health, CDC type standards for movement and for resistance training. You can add it up incrementally. You don't need to go to the gym for 2 hours. And I was just talking about that with a client earlier who is kind of working together with me and someone else. And the other workouts that are being given to her are like 90 minutes to 2 hours long. And she's feeling burnout on having to do the whole thing. And I was telling her, like, as a trainer, to me, that's really long, three
Yeah.
times a week. Like that's a long workout. Like,
I like
would
to
have
work out and
trouble
I don't
doing
want to
that.
be in the gym that long.
Yeah,
I even
yeah.
noticed it just with like, I was at the gym this morning and was talking about this with a few friends that I ran into there, just like now going to a bigger gym and it being more of a process to like park and get inside and
the transitions are bigger.
yeah, like those things then impact the amount of time you're spending there. And for me, that's when I look at my watch and I'm like, how have I already been here for over an hour? And so what I do is I will then cut down on the number of exercises I'm going to perform inside of that specific workout. And it's totally okay. It's like the reminder to people that, hey, if you have so many other boxes checked on how you're taking care of yourself and that you're eating well and everything we've been speaking about so far, if your workout is 42 minutes versus, 67,
75 or right.
You're not going to like lose your muscle. It's not going anywhere,
Yeah. And that's what I told this client. I said, bodies are really smart. They will respond to the stimulus you're giving them. And the great likelihood is after about an hour in the gym, you've already accomplished probably 95 to 97% of the stimulus that you can meaningfully give your body that it can respond to. And that's not to say like, anything over an hour is a waste of time. It's, that's not a rule. But the idea being, if you need to cut things to make it more livable for your lifestyle, that's all exercise is it's just signals to your body, and you can give those signals to your body in a shorter amount of time. It's completely effective to shorten workouts.
Yeah. And I went through that like personal struggle over the course of like end of 2022 into 2023, because between like 21 and 22, I was really focused on this journey of, I had done the whole boutique fitness, like high intensity type training for a long time without proper recovery and food. And that put me in a position of getting very burnt out and eventually getting to a point of being like, okay, I'm going to take a totally different approach to the way I train. It turned into a like absolutely no cardio, being very intentional about taking much longer rest periods between sets, because I was in a place of that intense burnout that I was like, okay, like let's use this to kind of get back into it. But then fast forward into the end of 22 into 23, my life got busier. The fitness fix got bigger. I was managing more things. And I started to fall into that trap of the all or nothing mindset to where I would skip workouts because I had this story in my head of like, oh, well, I was spending 90 minutes in the gym previously, specific, like with intent by building in some of that rest time. And like, now I feel like I can't do it. So I would just like not do it at all. And that's something that I've really challenged myself with in the last year. And it's just made such a world of difference. And even for me as a coach, I have to have that conversation with my coach for him to just remind me to give me that permission too. Be like, hey, like hit the 30 minutes, like you're going to be good.
Yes. Yes. Well, and the other thing too is especially for people where there's a real seasonality issue where if you have young kids or it's a really stressful season in your career, like your company just got acquired, you have new roles, something like that, where it's not going to last forever. It is great to know how to scale your efforts, to like bring things down for a certain amount of time, because one of the issues with habits is that if you just keep going at a reduced volume, you'll actually retain the habit. You can keep it going versus when you go to zero, you are actually damaging the habit formation. You're losing that Velcro that the habit was stuck to. And then you have to take the long view of when that season passes, where are you going to be at that point? So even for people who are really, really focused on weight loss, yes, during a period where you have a lot more mouths to feed time-wise, yeah, you may not accomplish your goals at the same rate as if you had none of those obligations or responsibilities. But at the same time, you're going to be so much better off than if it's zero, because what happens during that time is you go backwards. You probably have more issues with your health or with your weight than you did before. You're deeper in the hole than you were before, versus maybe having achieved some modest goals and still having routines and habits that you can rely on, having a healthier relationship with food and with your body. So when you take the long view too, you can see where it's so much better to like rev up and rev down rather than just collapse to zero and then have to rebuild from the bottom all the way up again.
And ultimately, I find, and I'm sure you could say countless examples of this too, the rub there for people is being impatient and saying,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I don't want this to take as long. And it's like, well, what are we in this for? If this is truly for you to lead this lifestyle and us really speaking to this idea of sustainability, then what difference does it make if it does take those few extra months, knowing that the alternative is you like completely stepping off the gas and like hitting the brake pedal super hard?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not going to be in a better place at
Right.
that point. Yes. And that's actually a huge thing that I coach clients on is when we're talking about improving the long-term ability to maintain habits, maintain weight loss, you have to be choosing lifestyle strategies that are going to be a good fit for a long time, that are really resilient and durable. They feel really manageable, like you can keep doing it. It's like I said, it's not this huge burden or ball and chain that you have to keep doing. But then the flip side of that is you also have to relax or release timelines a little bit.
Mhm.
You can't say to yourself, I need to lose X amount of pounds by this date, because A, that often just stresses people out anyway and is counterproductive, but also because it's helpful to move process first, to move process into the forefront and to let the actual like weight loss goals just kind of recede a little bit, where yes, we are trying to generate body composition change, but at the same time you're not enforcing a timeline where you're not succeeding if you don't hit certain numbers by certain times. It's not like a benchmark game, if that makes sense.
1,000%. And even taking that a step further, when we're focused on strength training and really understanding body recomposition, there is a lot of learning in, hey, wow, look how much the shape of my body's changing. That maybe that
Mm-hmm.
number that you expected to see
Yes,
before on the scale, it starts to become different than what that expectation was. And I think that's so liberating for
absolutely.
people.
Yeah, it's kind of a cliche now because I think it gets said a lot, but
It
that
does.
idea of like your ideal weight is probably like 5 to 10 pounds heavier than you think it is. I think that is very true. Like when you're strength training, because people really underestimate how much in the past, maybe if they were lighter, maybe not leaner, but lighter, that they probably didn't have as much muscle mass as they thought they did,
Right.
or, you know, whatever their perceptions were. And then once you start strength training, for a woman who's like an experienced, if you've been strength training for 6 to 12 months, it's not impossible you're going to have a 5 to 10 pound difference in weight because of muscle. So, just in general, just completely, like I said, relaxing or releasing timelines. And to your point, even relaxing the quote finish line,
Yep.
that we just want to generate body composition change and not define success or failure by hitting certain standards, and instead just kind of letting things be more what they are. And I kind of I'm going to end up misquoting her, but one of my favorite quotes about this is from the dietitian Rainey McGregor, who
Oh,
really
I don't know her.
specializes in, yeah, she's like a very high performance sport dietitian, but she
Cool.
also really focuses on eating disorder recovery and red S for women. And she talks about how if you're training well and you're feeling well, your body composition will be what it's supposed to be over time. And I think that is such a good mindset because it really does put that process first rather than results first. You can still be results oriented, but you're putting your focus on what you're actually doing.
Yeah, 1,000%. I absolutely love that. I think that's great. And, before we come up on the end of our time here, I do want to dive a little bit deeper into the training aspect
Mm-hmm.
because, you started referencing strength training, developing that experience over 6 to 12 months. And I know, as you've previously shared with me, you work with a lot of women who maybe have had gym intimidation for years
Mm-hmm.
and are opening their minds to understanding the importance of strength training. So, talk me through maybe some of the self limiting beliefs that you see strategy and how you challenge your clients to look at those things differently as they are getting into the gym and learning that that strength can like open up so many possibilities for them and really significantly improve their health, especially when it's like maybe coming from a place of like thinking that it's like too late or you're starting this when it doesn't even matter what age, but like I think a lot of people make that comparison that like by the time they're 40, they're like, I can't start this now. And I think you work with a lot of women who have totally changed that for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the most important thing to say first is that strength training is just one of the most important health interventions that women can do for themselves, because regardless of weight, regardless of body composition, strength training really improves everything from energy to muscle mass to bone density to, you know, functional strength and fitness, vibrancy, longevity. There are a lot of things that strength training influences that are incredibly important for women and then get really overlooked because, you know, we've talked about weight management a little bit on this call, but I think one of the reasons that strength training hasn't just been the thing that women have always done is because it's not associated very much in terms of marketing with weight loss. And I think women are
more PR
very,
for that.
I think women are in general, big generalization, but very attracted to exercise that is promising, like this will help you lose more fat more quickly. And strength training just doesn't have that, you know, PR. And that's partly because it helps with body composition, but no, it's not like a fat loss exercise in the sense of that's not what it's for. You know, it can be part of that overall portfolio of what you're doing, and it's essential. So for a lot of women, I think, first of all, there's just a lack of belief that strength training is going to get them what they want. And I think that there's an accompanying tons of body image and concern fears about, you know, am I going to bulk up? Am I going to look the way I want if I start strength training? Is it going to prevent weight loss? Then, you know, this is typically as women age, you're going to start getting more into concerns of, am I going to hurt myself? And then am I going to end up not being able to exercise because I strained something or hurt myself? So there are a lot of reasons that women don't get into strength training. But what I work on with women is, first of all, just focusing on, let's get out of the mentality of the only worthwhile way to do strength training is, like you were saying, like the boutique HIIT classes that you may be holding weights, but it is not actually progressive strength training in the sense of it's not going to give you those same body composition changes as actually, you know, taking those longer rest periods, using heavier weights, not needing to feel like cardiovascularly worked up during a workout. Because once women can dissociate that a little better, where they don't have to feel like a destroyed puddle on the floor at the end of a workout, like you will actually make more progress. Like it is a more sane way of constructing your fitness lifestyle. So I think there's a lot of just like body image concerns and baggage around like femininity versus masculinity when women are getting into strength training. But then I think it's an issue of, then you have to make it attainable in terms of, do you need to have a home gym? Like one of the things you were referencing, sometimes the time lost with parking and going into the gym and the transition. For some people, you might need all or a portion of your weekly workouts to be at home because you don't have time to go to the gym, let's say 5 or 6 times a week. You need to redefine some of your exercise to be able to be done at home. And then there's just the like long-term enjoyment and motivation around it in terms of, set progressive goals so that you have something to be excited about. And I think that last point is especially effective for people who like their history is from long distance running or from some kind of endurance sport, because like they love numbers. So if you can actually transfer that into like strength related PRs, that's so motivating for people.
So true. And I think it's interesting you bring up that parallel of like finding that new goal, that thing to be excited about. And even I would say the contrast to having this story that you need to feel like you're dead at the end of the workout for it to count, right? It's like at some point, you said it, the sanity piece, like at some point, like, do you really want to work out that way? Like I had that realization. And when I think back to the way that I trained when I was like 22, 23, it was really fun for me then, but I'm just not at a period in my life where I want to do that. And some of it just comes with the fact that like I'm aware of other areas within my health, like sleep and recovery, that could be improved in order for me to have more capacity to train that way if I wanted to. Like all of
Yeah.
these different levers that we can pull, they influence each other. That's why they matter. And I think what you also said about just the fact that like there's intention behind what we're doing. And this is where the plug for coaching is just so important, because when you do feel confused, when you're not sure, I see so many women saying, well, the reason why I go to a class like that is because I want that guidance. I want that direction. And I'm all for that. Like
Mhm.
I hear them, I get it.
Mhm.
And to bring this really like full circle to things we were talking about, habits and systems and how to set them up in a way that is going to feel sustainable.
Mhm.
Something that I find is really successful in the approach that we take with the Fitness Fix is starting with nutrition first. And if
Mm.
somebody already has the routine in place around the way they're training and going to classes, like if that still keeps them excited about going to the gym, I won't have
Mhm.
them touch that right away. And it's say, hey, like let's
Mhm.
take the time, let's look at
Right.
this other lever and let's really dive into the nutrition piece. And what's so cool about it is naturally over time, they then come back to us as coaches and say, hey, like I'm ready now to start to explore this time in the gym by myself. And being able to witness that like growth and maturity is something that I find really rewarding as their coach.
So as a personal trainer, because that's a little bit of my bias, I'm often more exercise forward in
Mhm.
terms of how I coach. And part of that is because I always want exercise to be a major part of people's healthy habit portfolio. Other things may come and go, but I want them to always be exercising just because it's such an important part of health and self care. So I probably lead with that. But I totally agree in terms of not having to perfect every single thing at the same time. And I often encourage clients, yes, I'm offering a quote program, but it's also not a program in the sense that, okay, you're going to do it in 30 days or 90 days and
Right.
then you're going to be done. This is much more personalized when you're actually doing coaching. A lot of what I look at with clients is, okay, if we make these columns of your life, and there's, you were talking about sleep and recovery too. Let's say we have sleep and stress management, we have formal exercise, we have movement, and then we have nutrition to see, where are they the weakest
Mhm.
too? Because different people are going to have different areas that are the weakest that we can rapidly experience more results just by shoring up one area
Yeah.
and kind of keeping other areas on the back burner. And this isn't necessarily true for all my clients, but sometimes steps is the biggest margin that people, use like the phrase lever to pull. It's the biggest lever they can
Yeah.
pull because it's going to have a gigantic impact, and what they're doing is so low that it's
Mhm.
easy to turn it around. We're not talking about someone going from 10 to 20,000. It's more like 3,000 to 8,000 or something like that. So, to your point, you don't have to optimize every single thing. Sometimes just by analyzing, which of your personal, columns is the lowest, and then correcting that, and then checking back in with now what else needs to catch up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about like that visual with the columns too, because I think it gives people something to grasp onto that, like, again, you can quantify this, but not in a way of what we were saying at the very beginning around being like, I have to track this, I have to track that. More just like to have that understanding of where are some areas that I can take care of myself more and feel more supported
Mhm.
without a ton of friction. The step example is such a
Mhm.
great one. I've even seen it in the inverse where I went through a period of like forgetting how important steps were until I reduced them, because I went through the transition of teaching so many classes and personal training that I
Mhm.
actually like, it was just a part of my career and lifestyle that I was getting like 25,000 steps a
Oh,
day, but
yeah,
I
I think
never had to
most
think
fitness
about it.
professionals have been there. Yes.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then you transition to having your online business. And all of a sudden I was like,
Mhm.
wait a second. Like I would look at
Yes.
my watch and be like, oh, this is only like 3,000 steps. It gave me an
Mhm.
appreciation for how hard it can feel for
Mhm.
people to not get those steps, but an even more of an appreciation for the support we provide in giving the goal, structure, guidance, whatever you want to call it, because that turned into me saying, hey, let me have the walking pad and use it for certain calls. Let me schedule in that time, that break to get outside and go for the walk and take the 20 minutes to do that. So much so that like those habits, I've just grown to have such an appreciation for them because I didn't need to, so to speak, go through that at any other point.
Yeah, I know. I think so many fitness professionals have been through that transition that, you know, if you do more online coaching, suddenly you have a desk job like your clients, and you suddenly have so much more compassion for the fact that, like, yeah, it's hard to hit 10,000 steps a day with a desk job. You know, you don't give that advice out in a cavalier way anymore. You understand that it's tough, but, you know, like you said, those creative solutions, you know, earlier I was talking about that kind of manipulating your schedule a little bit. Yeah, getting a walking pad and walking for like 2 calls per day can totally transform your steps. And I think that in terms of systems is an easy way for people to harness, again, that grab that low hanging fruit in their schedule where you don't have to make extra time. You don't have to make it hard. You can make it really, really doable and not feel like such a sacrifice.
Well, that's a mic drop. And I think a great place for us to bring this home. And I can see now and just us having more of these interactions and, you know, some of our mutual friends, why we were connected, because so much of our we align. And this
absolutely
is super fun. And I've loved everything you've shared. And I'm excited for feedback on this episode and hearing the parts that really stick with people and everything. But before we let you go, I like to keep it fun and light at the very end and do a little lightning round to close us out. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. So the first question I'm going to ask, because you have so many books sitting behind you, and I'm sure interesting titles back there. Anything you're reading right now or have read recently that you would recommend?
Yes. Okay. So I recently read 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. Highly recommend. Then on the fun note, I'm also reading Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, which is being adapted for Stars.
Cool.
So if you're into like period dramas, that's like the other side of my reading is fiction. So both of those are very good books.
Nice. I'm going to look both of them up. I'll link them in the show notes too. If you had one exercise in the gym that you could avoid for the rest of your life, what would it be?
What would it be? I think anything hamstring related.
Okay.
Anything like curls, and people wouldn't believe it because it's always in my workouts when I post them to my stories, but I do not enjoy working hamstrings.
Well, hey, sometimes the things that we don't enjoy are
exactly. It's your weak spot. That's why you got to work it.
Now let's do the opposite. If you were only doing one thing for the rest of your life, your absolute favorite exercise, what would you do?
I really enjoy leg workouts, especially like push type workouts, like squatting, skater squats, split squats, any of those I'm like totally happy with.
Nice. What is your favorite food?
I love in general Asian food. It might be in a tie with pizza, but for like home cooking, I love to make you know, stir fries, curry. I'm all over the place with Asian food, but I love it for, you know, making delicious, healthy home cooking.
Cool. If you were, I don't know if you have any like specific podcasts that you've been recently listening to, or, you know, the last podcast you listened to or something, but any of like your top favorite podcasts that you recommend. Doesn't have to be health and fitness related.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to be getting off the health and fitness train here. Okay. I love the British podcast, No Such Thing as a Fish. And that is one of those things with a cult following where if any of your other listeners listen to it, like you're definitely going to get a message about it being like, no such thing as a fish, because people love it, get obsessed with it. But then in terms of health and fitness, you know, I love, I don't know how to say her last name. It's Alice Living. I really enjoy her podcast, Give Me Strength. I've been enjoying that very much lately.
Cool. And very last question to bring this all together and tie it back to the first question too. Now that we've unpacked and covered so many different aspects of health, fitness, wellness over the course of this last hour, if somebody could only have one takeaway from this, like take one nugget from the conversation, what would you ask them to consider?
Probably like what we kept coming back to, just the one word systems. in terms of how do you take what you want to do and put it on autopilot in your life. Maybe like 1 to 2 habits where it just makes it easier, it makes it more automatic, it involves less thinking, more repetition, and you just can set it and forget it. So that idea of systems, if you can apply that to 1 or 2 things, it will change your life.
Amazing. Well, Rachel, thank you again. Thank you so much. If anybody wants to
Thank
stay
you.
connected with you, follow you, all those good things on social media, tell us where we can find you.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm on Instagram at Rachel Trotta CPT, and that's the main place I hang out.
Perfect. We'll link it down in the show notes too. For everybody who tuned in today, I know there is so much that you can get from this podcast, so much you can also share with other people. So if there's somebody in your life that you want them to come on board with some of these things and maybe hear it from our perspective, do yourself a favor and do us a favor and share it with them too, because we appreciate it since it helps the show. And as always, from wherever you are listening from, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.